I lived through something I wouldn't wish on anyone. A pair of imposters pretending to be HOA officials tried to throw us out and even pointed a gun at my 82-year-old grandfather. Their excuse? They claimed there was some emergency order forcing us to move. The only real emergency that day was how quickly they wound up in handcuffs. But I should rewind and explain how it all started. My name's Cal Reynolds, and all of this began because of my grandpa's single acre of land, the only piece in the neighborhood with real, towering trees. We live in Creekwood Estates, North Carolina. Those oaks were standing long before the cookie-cutter fences and matching mailboxes showed up. Betty Brown, head of our homeowners association, despises those trees. She calls them dangerous. I privately call her Karen, though not to her face. Grandpa Jack just calls her that woman. He fought in Vietnam. He knows danger when he sees it, and a cranky lady in a golf cart isn't on his list. At least that's what we believed. The first sign of real trouble came on a Tuesday. I went out to grab the mail, and our box wasn't just dented, it was flattened. The post leaned over like an empty soda can, and letters were scattered all down the ditch, many of them ripped open. My stomach knotted instantly. This wasn't a random car clipping it. The deep tire grooves in the soft shoulder told me someone had stopped, gotten out, and smashed it deliberately, probably with a sledgehammer. I picked up one shredded envelope. It was addressed to Grandpa, from the VA. Torn straight through. My chest burned hot with anger. Destroying a veteran's mail was a line you don't cross. I carried the ruined letters back to the porch. Grandpa Jack sat in his rocker, slowly polishing a pair of old binoculars. He moves slower nowadays, but his eyes never miss. He took one look at my expression, then at the letters in my hands, and put the binoculars down with deliberate care. His jaw locked as he stared toward the road. I could almost see the calculations running in his mind. He always thought several steps ahead. "They're getting bold," I muttered. He just nodded. "People get bold when they think there won't be consequences," he rumbled. He pushed himself up, joints stiff, and came over. He took a torn piece of mail, studied it, then glanced at the road again. "Federal crime," he said firmly. "I know," I answered. "I'll call the postal inspector." He approved with another nod. "Good. Get a name, a file number, a direct line. Skip the switchboards." That was Grandpa, exacting, disciplined, all about the details. While I made the call, he disappeared into the garage. I heard metal clanging. Soon he emerged hauling a brand-new steel post, twice as thick as the old one, along with a shovel and a bag of concrete. Without hesitation, he started digging a new hole beside the wrecked post, deeper this time. 82 years old, digging like a man half his age. Stubborn wasn't even the word. Meanwhile, Inspector Martinez on the other end of the line listened carefully as I laid everything out. How our HOA president Betty had been pressuring us to sell, so she could put a pickleball court where our oaks stood, and how our mailbox had been wrecked. He told me to photograph everything, keep a record, and build a file. He even said he was already working a case in our county and could stop by if necessary. I had just hung up when I noticed it. A black SUV creeping down the street. It slowed as it passed our property, then sped up again. No plates, just an empty dealer frame. A chill shot through me. This wasn't Betty's usual newsletter threats. This was something darker. The driver rolled down the window and raised his phone. He snapped pictures of me, the house, and smirked. "Nice mailbox," he said, flat and cold. Then he idled long enough to let his exhaust fog the air before rolling on. My skin crawled. Grandpa never even looked up. One more shovel of dirt went into the hole. "They want you to flinch," he said calmly. "Don't." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just vandalism anymore. It was intimidation. They wanted us scared. But looking at Grandpa, still steady with each shovelful, I knew fear wasn't part of the plan. We weren't leaving. This was our home, our land, and no one was going to push us off it. He dug until the hole was nearly 3 feet deep, building a foundation for a new post that felt more like a fortress than a mailbox stand. Every action they took, he intended to counter, stronger, smarter, and fully within the law. The sun sank low, throwing long shadows from the trees Betty despised so much. Grandpa set the post in concrete, sweat streaking his brow. "Cal," he said in that steady voice of his, "get the security cameras. The good ones." Of course he was ahead of me. Of course he was prepared. As I went inside, I realized this was only the beginning. The black SUV was more than a threat. It was a declaration. They'd be watching us. But now we'd be watching them too. And we did. Those SUVs became regular fixtures. There were always two parked down the street in plain sight, always with a clear view of our driveway. Never any plates. Sometimes they followed me to the store, keeping just far enough back to avoid trouble, but close enough to make their point. It was harassment meant to eat away at your sense of safety. Instead, it just fueled my anger. Grandpa? He almost found it funny. He'd wave at them from his rocker, slow and mocking, like greeting an unwanted neighbor. I could feel the fury boiling off those men. I started photographing everything. With a telephoto lens, I tracked the times, the routes, the length of their stays. I built a log just like Martinez told me to. The two men inside were always the same. Large, heavy-set, ex-jock types who wore polo shirts with a stitched eagle clutching a gavel. It was the so-called insignia of the Creekwood Estates Compliance and Safety Board, Betty's fake committee. I checked. It wasn't registered anywhere, had no legal standing, nothing but a made-up title for her two hired thugs. One evening, while Grandpa and I mounted our high-end night vision cameras, commercial-grade equipment he'd bought years earlier, one SUV stopped right across the street. The passenger lowered his window and stared at us. His thick neck and permanent scowl said everything. He wanted us nervous. Grandpa ignored him completely, focused on tightening a bracket. "Hand me the 3/8 wrench, Cal," he said evenly. I passed it over, feeling the man's stare drilling into my back. "They're watching us," I muttered. Grandpa just grunted. "Good. Let them. People who hide look guilty." He slid the cable through a drilled hole and spoke softly. "In Vietnam, we did a lot of watching. You learn their patterns, their weaknesses, and eventually they always slip. Always." Grandpa's gaze sharpened on me. "They think this is easy," he said. "They figure they can just sit in their SUVs, glare at us, and an old man with his grandson will cave. They don't have the faintest clue what they've stepped into." He was right. They probably thought a paycheck from the HOA made them untouchable. They assumed their presence alone would scare us into submission. That arrogance was their first mistake. It wouldn't be their last. We finished mounting the cameras, one covering the porch, another on the garage watching the driveway, and a third hidden high in the old oak tree, giving us a clear view of the whole property. Each camera fed into a DVR in my office, and I could monitor them on my laptop or straight from my phone. That night, once the SUVs finally left, Grandpa and I sat in the kitchen. He sipped tea from his favorite mug while I scrolled through the feeds. The images were razor sharp. "We've got proof now," I said. "Every move they make is on record." Grandpa nodded, calm as ever. "Good," he said. "Now let's talk about Theo." Theo Neighbor was a character. Retired electrical engineer, ham radio nut. His roof bristled with antennas like some Cold War listening post. He loved to chatter, but he was a decent man. And if anyone in Creekwood Estates despised Betty Brown more than we did, it was Theo. She fined him endlessly for those antennas, calling them ugly. "What about Theo?" I asked. Grandpa's eyes gleamed. "Theo's got skills. He knows signals, knows networks, probably bounce a transmission off the moon if he felt like it. Talk to him tomorrow. Don't beg for help. Just tell him what's happening. See how he responds." Another chess move. Grandpa wasn't just building defenses, he was gathering allies. That night, as I lay in bed, his words kept echoing. Bullies thrive on fear and isolation. We were taking away the isolation by pulling Theo into our circle. And as for fear, they were blind to the truth. They saw only a frail old man and his grandson. They didn't see a war-hardened veteran who'd survived worse than a couple of hired muscle in a black SUV. And they didn't see a grandson who'd protect his family no matter the cost. The SUVs weren't just a threat. They were also a gift. They'd shown their faces, and now we had a strategy. The game had shifted. They thought they were hunters. They'd learn soon enough who was really being tracked. The next move came on a Thursday night, just after 10. I was in my office reviewing the day's footage when the whole house suddenly dropped into darkness. My monitor, desk lamp, clock, all dead. I blinked in the blackness. Power outage? I fumbled for my phone, its glow cutting the dark, and checked the utility map. No outages reported anywhere near us. I pulled the curtain aside. Every other home on the street glowed normally. Street lights burned steady. Betty Brown's house down the way blazed with her tacky landscape spotlights. Just us. Our home was the single dead patch in a glowing neighborhood. I hurried to the garage and checked the breakers. All flipped to on. I cycled the main switch. Nothing. Silence pressed heavy. Then came Grandpa's slow, steady tread. He carried an old kerosene lamp, its flame casting a warm flicker on the walls. The scene looked like it belonged in another century. "Check the water," he ordered. I twisted the faucet. Air coughed. Pipes rattled. Then nothing. "Water's out too," I said tightly. This was no prank. Cutting utilities wasn't harassment, it was assault. My grandfather needed heat and water. "They cut the lines at the street," Grandpa said, not speculating, stating. He set the lamp on the table, his face calm, the flame's light painting him like a commander in a war tent. "They want us to panic," he said. "They want a medical emergency. Force us out, claim we abandoned the place. Classic dirty play. Manufacture a crisis. Swoop in." My chest seared with rage, but I forced it down. Panic would give them what they wanted. Calm would kill their plan. "I'll call utilities, and the sheriff," I said. Grandpa gave a short nod. "Good. Use your cell. Outside. Assume they're listening." I hadn't even considered that. Of course, if they were bold enough to saw through our lines, they might be tapping phones too. He opened a pantry I didn't even know existed and pulled out 2 more kerosene lamps and a big insulated water cooler, the kind used at construction sites. He'd filled it earlier that day. He'd anticipated this move. "How did you know?" I asked, amazed. He gave me that grim smile. "Patterns. First they vandalized. Then they tried fear tactics with the SUVs. Next step? Make the environment hostile. It's right out of the playbook." I stepped outside into the chill night air. Gravel crunched underfoot. A hinge creaked near the oaks. I killed my phone light. The dark closed in. Then came the faint scrape of a shovel. My pulse jumped. "Backyard," I whispered. Grandpa's lamp winked out behind me. We slipped into the shadows. My breath sounded too loud. Heart hammering. Whoever it was, they were inside the line. Stars burned sharp above. Our house blacked out behind us. I called the power company, explained, insisted. Same with the water department. Both doubted me at first until I mentioned the mailbox report. That changed their tone. Emergency crews were dispatched, but it'd be hours. Next, I called the sheriff's office. At first, the dispatcher was bored. Then I cited the ongoing harassment, the SUVs, the postal inspector's case number. Her voice tightened. She was sending a deputy. Heading back toward the porch, I froze. Movement in the oaks. I raised my phone light. The beam cut through the shadows, landing on 2 figures. The SUV goons. Shovels in hand. They were digging. When the light hit them, they froze, then bolted, dropping shovels, scrambling over the back fence into the night. I ran forward and saw the hole. Next to it lay a plastic-wrapped brick. The kind you see in drug busts. They were planting contraband. The plan was clear. Cut our lines, force us out, then discover drugs on our property with a convenient tip-off. A frame-up. My stomach turned. I hurried inside, hands trembling. "They were burying something," I told Grandpa. He only nodded grimly. "That's why I had you put the camera in the tree." He pointed to my laptop, still alive on battery. "Pull up camera 3. I clicked, and there it was in perfect night vision. The men sneaking in, digging, planting the package, then fleeing when my flashlight hit them. We had them nailed. When the deputy arrived half an hour later, I showed him the footage and the untouched package. His whole demeanor changed. No longer bored small-town cop, now serious investigator. Backup arrived. Forensics bagged the package, time-stamped and sealed. They photographed the vents on the SUVs and logged tow alerts. Soon, red and blue lights washed over our dark street. Utility crews confirmed it. Our power meter yanked, our water valve sawed shut. The evidence piled high, pointing directly to Betty's fake safety board. They'd tried to isolate us in the dark. Instead, they lit the street with flashing patrol cars. They'd tried to plant evidence on us. Instead, they documented their own crimes. Grandpa sat at the table with his tea, kerosene light flickering across his satisfied face. "Told you," he murmured. "They got lazy. Now they'll pay." By morning, power and water were restored. But the fight had escalated. This was no longer a feud. It was war. The next morning, yellow police tape still cordoned off the half-dug hole in our yard. A sheriff's cruiser sat at the curb, quiet but unmistakable. Power buzzed, water flowed, but the air was heavy with tension. We knew Betty wouldn't retreat. She'd push harder. She always did. Around noon, I found a piece of paper taped to our door. No envelope, just flapping in the breeze. It looked official, thick paper, bold header. Emergency order of abatement and removal. It was packed with legal-sounding nonsense. Whereas, hereinafter, citing a phantom ordinance, it claimed our property was a clear and present danger because of unstable trees and non-compliant structures, meaning Grandpa's old shed. The kicker was at the bottom. We had 24 hours to vacate so a team could remediate hazards. Signed by Betty Brown, HOA president, and countersigned by some Markham, supposedly a county compliance officer. But it was a forgery, a sloppy one. The seal was pixelated, clearly pulled off the internet. The ordinance number didn't exist. The officer's signature was the same handwriting as Betty's. They honestly thought a scary-looking document would make us fold. I brought it to Grandpa, who was on the porch with a book on military history. He slipped on his glasses, read the page twice, then a slow smile spread across his face. Not joy, a predator's smile. "This," he said, folding it neatly, "is a gift." He handed it back like it was a dead snake. "See that seal? Look close. That's a pelican." I squinted. He was right. Pelican County. He chuckled. "We don't even have pelicans in this county." He pulled out his phone. "Call Martinez, then the sheriff, then Theo, and put coffee on. Strong." "A plan?" I asked. "Simple," he said. "Cameras rolling. Porch cleared. Smiles ready. We let them hang themselves." "It's a forged eviction notice," I said, my anger boiling. "They're trying to steal our house." Grandpa's eyes gleamed with a cold excitement. "It's bigger than that. Forged government seal? Felony. Impersonating an officer? Felony. Using fake papers to seize property? Felony." Betty just handed us the rope. He was right. The mailbox was a federal crime. The planted drugs were state crimes. And now this was another layer, federal fraud. Betty's stunt with the fake eviction notice had backfired in the worst way. She thought she was playing queen of the neighborhood, but she had just signed her own confession with a forged county seal. Grandpa didn't see it as a threat. He saw it as a gift. He called it what it was, a felony, and not just one. Impersonating an officer, forging government documents, attempting to seize private property. Betty had crossed into serious federal crime territory. We didn't waste a second. I sent a high-res scan of the bogus order to Inspector Martinez, who practically leapt through the phone when he saw it. The sheriff's detective asked me to bring the original to the station, and Grandpa's call to the state attorney general added another layer. Suddenly, this wasn't just harassment. It was racketeering, conspiracy, fraud. Betty thought she was harassing an old man and his grandson. In reality, she had declared war on the Postal Service, the Sheriff's Office, and the state of North Carolina. But the real show started when Betty's so-called abatement team showed up early. 2 white vans pulled up, painted with Creekwood Estates' phony compliance logo. Out came the 2 thugs from the drug planting stunt, plus 2 more guys. One of them was the infamous Markham, the supposed county officer with a comb-over and a clipboard. He strutted up like he owned the place and announced that Grandpa needed to vacate the property. Grandpa just rocked in his chair, calm as stone. When I told Markham he wasn't listed as any county official, the color drained from his face. The paper he waved around was worthless, and I made sure the camera caught every word. But intimidation was their game, and one of the goons decided to escalate. His hand dropped to the pistol at his hip, a clear attempt to scare us into submission. That was when Grandpa stood, slowly, deliberately. To anyone else, he looked like a frail old man straightening his back. But I knew better. His right hand was already gripping the Colt 1911 tucked into the small of his back. His voice dropped low, steady, carrying the weight of someone who'd faced death before. "Son, take your hand off that weapon. You're on my property, and if you pull that gun, I will consider it a direct threat to my life and my grandson's." The air went still. The thug, Donnie, I'd later learn, pulled the pistol anyway. He didn't point it yet, just held it at his side, like he still thought he had the upper hand. That was his mistake. A siren wailed in the distance, growing louder, and then Theo's voice exploded from the little speaker on our porch. "We are live, folks. Creekwood Unofficial Neighborhood Watch is on the air. We've got ourselves a situation. Unidentified male in a very sad-looking polo pointing a gun at 82-year-old war hero Jack Reynolds. Someone get this man a better shirt and a prison sentence." Theo had turned my phone's live feed into a broadcast, not just online but over ham radio. Neighbors who'd been hiding behind curtains now poured out of their houses. Porch lights flicked on up and down the street. People stepped onto their lawns, cameras in hand. Donnie's tough guy mask cracked, panic flickering across his face as the whole neighborhood, and half the county, thanks to Theo, watched him hold a gun on an old veteran. He lowered the pistol a fraction, torn between Grandpa's unshakable stare, the approaching sirens, and Theo's booming play-by-play that made him look like a clown. What was supposed to be an easy eviction had turned into a Livestream disaster. Betty's empire of fear was collapsing, and everyone was watching it burn. Neighbors began stepping out onto their lawns, phones in hand, watching the stream and now witnessing everything unfold live. The isolation Betty had relied on was gone. We were no longer alone. Witnesses surrounded us. A bright red pickup screeched to a stop at the end of our driveway. Out stepped Mr. Henderson, for houses down, gripping a tire iron. He didn't say a word, just stood there radiating menace. Then Mrs. Gable from across the street emerged, clutching a garden rake like a spear. Markham, the fake compliance officer, saw the tide of the neighborhood turning against him. His face went pale. "Pack it up. Let's move," he barked, voice cracking. But it was too late. A county sheriff's cruiser, lights flashing, roared up and blocked the panel vans. Another cruiser slid in behind. Two deputies jumped out, hands ready on their holsters. They weren't bluffing. "Sheriff's Department, drop the weapon now," one shouted. Donnie, the hired thug with the gun, froze. He was trapped. His eyes darted from Grandpa to the deputies, the fight draining out of him. Slowly, awkwardly, he laid the gun on the ground and raised his hands. The other goons followed instantly, arms shooting into the air. Grandpa finally eased, pulling his hands from behind his back. Empty. The Colt remained tucked away, mission accomplished without ever being seen. That single moment, him standing calm while a fake cop pointed a gun, was all the internet needed. He had won the standoff with sheer nerve. As deputies cuffed Donnie and the others, another car rolled up. A plain sedan. Out stepped a man in a suit with a badge clipped to his belt. Postal Inspector Martinez. He recited our case number to keep everything tied together, then strode straight to the porch. He nodded at Grandpa, then at me. "Mr. Reynolds, Cal, I think you have a few things that belong to me." By that, he meant the thieves. Deputies searched the vans, pulling out fake badges, more forged abatement notices, and even lists of other houses marked for targeting. This was no isolated attack, it was a coordinated campaign of intimidation. Theo's voice crackled triumphantly through the speakers. "And there you have it, folks, a textbook takedown, thanks to the Sheriff's Department and the United States Postal Inspection Service. Big applause for Jack and Cal Reynolds for refusing to back down. Surprisingly, applause rippled across the street. Neighbors smiled, raised thumbs, relief washing away the fear Betty had cultivated for years. Markham stammered and sweated as he tried in vain to explain himself to a deputy. Grandpa settled back into his rocking chair, looking tired but deeply satisfied. He had faced down an armed man without flinching. He had protected his family and his home with nothing but steadiness and nerve. He had stared into the abyss, and the abyss blinked. But though the immediate threat was neutralized, Betty Brown, 2 doors down, was surely watching from her window. Her plan had collapsed, her army broken. But the larger war wasn't over. We had just won the Battle of Elm Drive. With the evidence in hand and new allies on our side, we finally had the ammunition we needed. The Livestream had turned a private ambush into a public reckoning. It had saved us by showing the truth in real time. Neighbors now lingered on sidewalks, whispering excitedly. They had seen the enforcers for what they were, just bumbling thugs in cheap polos. The fear was shattered. Then, as deputies led the men to squad cars, a younger officer searching the second van called out, "Sarge, you're going to want to see this." The supervising deputy and Martinez hurried over. From the van came a gym bag. The deputy unzipped it. Inside were baggies of white powder. Classic planted contraband. I saw Donnie smirk, glancing at our porch. This was their backup plan. If intimidation failed, they'd frame us with drugs, claiming we tossed the bag in during the chaos. Their word against ours. But Grandpa and I had prepared for this too. Now, I said loudly, would be a good time to turn on the floodlights. Grandpa flipped a hidden switch by the door. Instantly, industrial-grade floodlights bathed the entire yard in blinding white, while a deafening industrial siren wailed like a construction site alarm. Deputies flinched, neighbors gasped, and the goons doubled over, wincing. "What the hell is that?" the sergeant shouted. "Our anti-idiot system," I yelled back. "Check the porch cam aimed at the van." A discreet camera had been watching all along. Grandpa silenced the siren, leaving the lights blazing. Deputies quickly pulled the footage, reviewing the angle I had perfectly positioned. It showed one of the goons sliding the gym bag into the van after arriving. Clear as day, the drugs had been planted. The sergeant's jaw tightened as he turned to the handcuffed thugs. Well. Adding possession with intent to distribute and planting false evidence to your list. You boys are really going for the high score today. Donnie's smugness evaporated, his bravado crumbling into ash. Outsmarted, outmaneuvered, outplayed. But the night wasn't done. Another car pulled up, this time a modest sedan. Out stepped Brenda, the HOA treasurer. She clutched a large manila envelope to her chest. Nervous but determined, she said, "I need to talk to whoever's in charge." Martinez stepped forward. "I'm with Postal Inspection. What do you have?" Brenda drew a breath. "I'm the HOA treasurer. Betty, Mrs. Brown, has been cooking the books. I have the real ledgers. She used our dues to fund these men. She listed it as security and beautification. She bought the uniforms, vans, weapons, all of it, over $50,000. She handed over the envelope. A gasp spread through the crowd. Their own money had funded their torment. The floodlights illuminated the scene. The disgraced thugs, the planted drugs, and the brave treasurer with damning ledgers. Theo's voice cut in one final time, gleeful. "And the plot thickens. The treasurer has flipped, folks. Better than television." Martinez flipped through the top pages, eyes narrowing. He and the sheriff's sergeant shared a look. It was over. Every receipt, every check connected Betty Brown to the crimes. Grandpa leaned close to me, whispering with a small smile, "Chess, not checkers, Cal. Always chess." The floodlights blazed on, revealing the wreckage of Betty's little kingdom. Brenda's whistleblowing lit the match. Martinez and the sergeant wasted no time contacting higher offices. This was no longer simple harassment, it was organized crime. Neighbors began sharing their own horror stories of Betty's petty fines and threats. She hadn't just targeted us. She had bullied everyone. Grandpa was already moving pieces again, whispering instructions to Theo. An hour later, official vehicles rolled in, state troopers and unmarked sedans. They lined up neatly in front of Betty's house. Her lights went dark, a pathetic attempt at hiding. Out stepped a calm man in a sharp suit, Davenport, from the Attorney General's office. He accepted Brenda's ledgers and marched up with a warrant. He knocked firmly. "Betty Brown, this is the Attorney General's office. We have a warrant for your arrest and a search warrant. Open the door." Silence. Davenport nodded to a trooper. With one blow of a battering ram, the front door splintered. Troopers stormed in, flashlights slicing through shadows. Moments later, Betty was dragged out in pajamas, hair wild, face twisted with rage and fear. In handcuffs, she spotted us and shrieked, You ruined everything." Grandpa remained silent, his expression unreadable. Her disgrace spoke louder than words. No cheers, just silence and relief. Davenport handed Grandpa a card. "Mr. Reynolds will be in touch. With this evidence, not only can we prosecute Betty Brown, but dissolve this HOA for criminal activity." Dissolved. The word hung heavy. Betty went to prison. Felonies stacked from impersonating officials to racketeering. Her enforcers went down with her. 2 months later, the HOA itself was dissolved. No more dues, no more tyranny. Freedom. Life slowly returned. Neighbors spoke freely. Children's toys filled lawns. Mr. Henderson replaced his beige fence with a white picket one. Theo became a local hero, teaching radio to neighbors. One Saturday, Grandpa and I sat on the porch. He cleaned his binoculars, same as when it began. Neighbors drifted over. Mr. Henderson with a six-pack, Mrs. Gable with pie, Brenda with lemon cake. They shook hands, patted backs. No speeches, just gratitude. Grandpa gazed at the tall oaks Betty once wanted gone. Still standing, stronger than ever. "Good people," he murmured. "They just needed a reminder." He had fought a different war this time, patient, lawful, steady. And the lesson stuck. The line between law and revenge can blur, but right and wrong never does. Protect your home. Protect your family. Never let a bully win. The sun sank warm over our street. Laughter carried. For the first time in years, it felt like a neighborhood again. Our land was safe. Our home secure. Grandpa raised his binoculars toward the horizon. Not for threats, but for peace.